It is that time of the week again, time for another bonus episode of the Paul Ryder tapes. I'm just coming down from seeing Echo and the Bunnymen last night at the Greek Theatre in Los Angeles, which was amazing. And I've just seen that apparently David Hasselhoff was there, and I don't know why, but that really made me titter. Anyway, this week's episode features a fan favourite. This is the third interview that he's done for the series because we just can't get enough of him. He's one of Paul's very best and closest friends in the world, and his partner in rhythm, the drum to his bass, quite literally. They met when he was still at school, and he's always supported Paul through the good and the terrible times. It's the Duke of the Drum, the Royal of Rhythm, the Baird of the Beat, but he's not actually just a drummer. Now he's got another project called Yogi G and the Family Tree, where he actually sings and plays the guitar. It is, of course, the legendary, the lovely, the Happy Mondays drummer, and the all-round brilliant musician in his own right, Gaz Whelan. Okay, so when we spoke last, you told a lot of stories about the bad stuff, but also a lot of the good stuff. Thoughts come to you in the interim about memories that have surfaced that you'd buried maybe before, or anything new that's come to mind that you've thought about in the last few months?
No. You know what's weird though? It's funny because we'll be watching something now, but I can't remember. We was at this pictures recently. Vanessa watching, so I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. And something happened, something funny, and we looked at each other, we both went, "Oscar, I love that. That's what And it's so it comes up all the time, and all the time. Even Vanessa says things like, "Oh, Paul, that would have been right with Paul Street," and there's loads of things, and like finding them tracks that he'd done with Eddie and some other tracks and playing them. And I was playing to Vanessa, and she's like, "They're great, Anna." I was like, "They're amazing." And we had these ideas, and we took them, and the band just wouldn't have it. And she's like, "Why not? They're as good as anything." And it started making me think of. Maybe the politics did run deeper than we think. Maybe we weren't being paranoid. I don't know.
I don't think you were being paranoid, were you? Why do you think you're being paranoid? Because there wasn't...
Well, not paranoid, but in bands what it's like. It's dynamics, and you start thinking maybe, maybe the songs just weren't good enough. Maybe because people have and like when you do songs, you have an idea and you've written them, and so other people are not on board with that idea, and that's just, it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just that they don't think, it's a different perspective, and you start thinking that, and then you start questioning, second guessing yourself, as you say, or question yourself. So maybe we thought, oh, maybe they wasn't, maybe we just convinced ourselves we're all right. And then it's been a long time since I heard them, and they're great. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
What were the songs that you found? Can you remember what they were called?
There was one, like there's like a Clash type one, a reggae one, and Paul had called it Guns of Flixton instead of Guns of Brixton. I remember that one, Guns of Flixton.
There wasn't the one with some French talking on, which I've never...
That was really good as well, yeah.
Do you have that?
No, because it was on my old laptop, and that's died. And I thought, and they're not on a hard drive or anything anywhere. I've looked everywhere for everything. I only found stuff that was on my old emails. That's in emails.
Okay, because I'm trying to assemble everything together so we can release all this unreleased stuff. We're going to release. I'm going to try and get everything, but I think we've probably got an album's worth of material. Actually, at this stage, we've probably got enough for the equivalent of a double album with all the material that I've managed to find. And we're going to be hearing the Guns of Flixton at the end of this episode, so keep listening. Well, let's just start at the very beginning.
All right.
So tell me about the very first time that you met Paul.
Well, actually, the very first time I met him was to the side street up from where I lived, and we used to play cricket and football on this side street between these terraced houses. And there was a lad who went to his school who was about 4 years older than me, a year older than Paul, 3 years older than me, a year older than Paul. And he'd come and he brought a few mates, and he was sat there, and he was just sat on the curb really quiet. And we were all playing football, and he didn't. I remember him. I just remember him. I remember it was him. And he didn't say anything. He was playing it very cool, like I was very quiet. Well, people think he's very cool. He's very quiet, really. Weren't he? Shy of a lot of things rather than really cool. No, he was cool as well. But you know what I mean? And I remember that, but I never really interacted then. But the first time was, I was in the last year of school. The band had started. There was Paul, Shaun, and Mark Day had started this band called Avant Garde. And Shaun was married to this girl, Denise, and her younger sister, Bev, was in my class at school. And Mark Day was in the 5th year and I was the 1st year, but he had a younger brother in my year. And they were both saying to me, our brothers and my sisters are in this band. They want you to come as a drummer. And I said, well, I'm not a drummer, I've just got a drum kit. And I thought, they can't be the same band, because Nigel's older brother was into heavy rock, Mark. And Bev's older sister, Denise, was this like kind of Bowie-esque thing. She had like dyed orange hair and all this Bowie makeup. So I thought, they can't be the same band. And I'd seen Shaun around with her. I remember Shaun with bleached hair and a blue suit on. And I thought, that can't be the same band as Mark Day, because Mark Day was on motorbikes and into like, with like Queen on his back. He was into... And I thought, it can't be the same band. And they kept persistently asking. I put it off. And then one day, they were rehearsing in the school in the room I learnt to read and write in this little church school across the road from where I used to hang out on this park. So curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over, and there was Shaun there, and Mark Day was there, so I'd seen them before. And then I spotted on the other side Paul, and he had a big cardigan on, and he was kind of both them to introduce themselves. Paul wouldn't look me in the eye, and he kind of like, all right, he would mumble. And I sat down and they played the songs, and it was obvious that it was Paul's band, even though he used the quiet one. They were all bass line driven. And I was kind of watching him. Kind of Shaun had all this echo on his voice, and you couldn't really hear what was going on. Mark was off doing all this mad guitar, but the bass lines were really catchy. And he was stood, and he dressed. I remember him looking really smart, and dressed really smart. And I just thought he was really striking to look at. And he kind of looked. And I'm not just saying this, he just looked different than the other two. He just looked very different. Because both them two Shaun and Mark were fair. I think Shaun had bleached hair from fair. And there's this dark kind of, later on I used to wind him up, call him Omar Sharif and stuff like that. We used to call him all sorts, didn't we? And he was just quite striking. But I was just glued to watching him. Then as the rehearsals finished, kind of Mark packed up and went, and Shaun did. And we just kind of wandered over to each other and started talking. And it was kind of love at first sight. It sounds very strange, but it was. And we just clicked. And then Shaun said, oh, come, I've got your cassette, come back to Nana's and I'll give you the cassette. So I kind of left with Shaun, but all the time leaving now, I was fascinated by Paul. I just found him really intriguing and interesting. And Shaun was a bit like me. I was a bit mouthy in them days. And Shaun was a bit like me, so we were very similar. Even though I was very similar to Paul, I was very shy and quiet and introverted. But to escape me into being introverted, I'd be loud, and so I was a bit like both of them. But what was really weird was I'd kind of grown. I always had lots of friends through my football and through music. I always had lots of friends. I wasn't a loner, but I always felt very alone and a bit of an outsider in them suburbs. I just thought everybody felt like that. Everyone feels like a bit of a loner and outsider, don't they? And my friends always thought I was a bit weird, and I wasn't. And then I met these two, and all of a sudden I was like, they reminded me of. I felt at home straight away with the two brothers. It was like I'd found two people who were like me, even though they were very different than me. They weren't into football. They didn't hang around with a big group of people, but they seemed very similar. And all of a sudden in that room, I felt like I'd found my two friends. But it became very apparent within a couple of hours that there was one friend who was going to be my real friend. Not because Shaun didn't do anything I didn't get on with. I just kind of was attracted to Paul. It was just something we got on. And by the second rehearsal, we were best mates. By the first time I brought my drums down and played, and nothing to do with bass and drums, we were just best friends. And we both loved Echo and the Bunnymen. And that was it. And they gave me a cassette, the second rehearsal. Cassette in a cigarette box, Echo and the Bunnymen. And we just become... And we had it's funny because me, him and Shaun, and later PD, when he joined the band, we had exactly the same sense of humour. Exactly the same. But me and Paul straight away, and he remembered, and maybe because me and Paul's only 2 years older than me, so maybe we had Mark and Shaun are 5 years older, so maybe there was that. And I thought it's really weird that maybe like my mum and Linda, we just clicked. We had our ups and downs like all married couples do. We fell out of it, but I think in all the years, I think we only had 2 arguments, and they were nothing. It was just me being neurotic, we just did. I don't know. It's just a really weird it was a really weird double act. Double act. We were like Derek and Barry. We just did. And it's funny how he never forgot things, did he? Anything. I remember once we were in Rill. And we ended up in this, we used to all go for weekends, this club, and there was just some bad cabaret on. And this comedian come on with a weird looking face. Really weird looking and dressed. And I looked at Paul and he went, fucking hell, it's Humphrey Cushion. And no one knew who Humphrey Cushion was, and I just couldn't get my breath for about half an hour. And he looked like Humphrey Cushion. And I remember going, that's just the funniest thing I've ever heard in my fucking... It was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. And then I remember... like he said, when he had his house in Crumsall, and there was these two old... There was in the post office, these three really old Jewish women with these big glasses. And he said, fucking hell, it's from DMC. And things like that, and he was the funniest person I've ever met in my life. Him and PD, the two funniest people I've ever met in my life. They were just so funny, and that humour, he had that very subtle humour, and we got each other. We'd say things, and me and him would laugh, and the rest of them didn't. And I don't know why, we just had that connection. But you know that, I don't know what it was.
And that carried on through the trajectory of your relationship through the next how many years? 40 years.
40 years. We was always best mates. Me and Paul were really different in lots of ways, but similar in a lot of ways. In characters, we're very different, but really similar. Even like up to recently with gigs, like, we like to, we'd get off after the gig and go to the hotel, or Paul wasn't drinking anything, but I like it quiet. I like my perfect night out is in a pub with a book and a pint, listening to a few people, I don't like crowds and madness, whereas Mark and the rest of them do, Me and Paul don't like that chaos because we both have chaos inside our heads for our mental health issues. So we don't want chaos on the outside. We want calm and serenity. So, we'd be happy to just get away from it. And so we're very similar in that way. I mean, very, very, as you know, very different, but really, really similar. Really similar. A lot more similar than people realise.
Do you feel his presence around you?
Too much, yeah, all the time. I always think like I think I said last time I spoke, it's like now I'm doing this solo work, whenever I'm doing stuff, I'm always thinking he's judging me. I always think, they can't do that. Paul would call that cheesy, or Paul would do that. But that's because, as we joined the band, I was 15, 16, so him and Shaun were the two people who were guiding me in music, and Mark, but them two especially. And especially Paul, because, they taught me how to be very, I don't want to use the word cool because that's wrong, but how to underplay things, how to downplay things. Don't oversell yourself. Don't do the big thing, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, or don't do the obvious. Don't say the obvious. Don't play the game so obviously. You know what I mean? And he was really good at that. And it's hard to do these days, Do
you feel that Shaun has done the opposite as things have transpired?
I think times have changed, and I think now you kind of have to. I think it's difficult, and I'm not... Well, you kind of have to, yeah. I think with people like Tony Wilson's ideas of things, or Bob Dylan these days, you wouldn't get a sniffing. Times have changed. And it's a difficult one, that, because, it's... I just think it's different being a frontman. I think you do what you've got to do, and I think, and I'm not copping out there. I just think I've thought about things differently now than I would. And if you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, I probably would have said yeah. But now I think it's just different. I think I think there was a bit of friction between me and Paul. Friction between me and Paul versus Shaun, because Shaun probably felt like me and Paul felt like that, and we probably did back then. We kind of got used to it and kind of warmed to it and accept it now. But we were kind of very old-fashioned in the way of, keep it rock and roll, and it should be about the music and about the art. And Shaun's like, don't be naive, times have changed, and no one's wrong. I think it's just different.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not being diplomatic now. I've just thought it differently, thought it through differently. Would I do that now? I don't know. I want to. Well, I'm doing my own stuff. I want to still do it the old way, and it'll probably be to my detriment. But I know that it's Paul on my shoulder all the time. Don't make a dick of yourself. Don't because I would and don't keep it real and. But yeah, it does musically as well, always. But it always was. It was always, and you can see it in. If you look at any live footage, it's hard. But there's something recent where I throw something in live. I can't something weird on the drums, and straight away I look round to me right, and I just get that glance off him. He wouldn't. He'd just be a look, and I knew the look would be, or it'd be like if he didn't, and he was just automatic, and I still do it now. I look to me right all the time, because he was the guy who taught me everything. And I'm not just saying it's true. He taught me everything musically. He really did.
And what's it feel like now when you do Monday's gigs?
I'm drinking more. I think it's. I've got me in here, so I'm in my own little world, and it's very different. But Monday's gigs for a while have just been like, I enjoy it and I still do it, but it's a job and it's after the gig and before the gigs where it's really different. Like I said, like on the way home last time, the first gig we got through without Paul, we kind of thought, we got through that okay, that wasn't too bad, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And then on the way home, we all sit in the same place. And Mark usually sits in the front, but for some reason Mark sat where Paul sat. Paul sat at the window, I sat at the door, the gap in between us. And Mark leant over and he was crying. So he put his head on my shoulder and started crying. He went, "We never stop anymore for a cig break or for a piss stop, do we?" And he was like, and that's when it kind of hit us, upset, rather than, because when you're focused on stage, when you're on stage, Paul didn't really communicate. We did our own thing anyway, apart from the odd glance. So that wasn't as hard, it was more before and afterwards.
So when Paul was, just explain why that's significant, because when Paul's on the bus, he's always stopping.
We had to stop every 10 minutes every half an hour for a cigarette so you could have a cig, which was perfect because I've got this big stone in my bladder like an old woman, so I have to stop for a piss. So we'd stop for a piss smoke stop. So we'd stop every half an hour, but now we're getting home too early. But and it used to piss Mark off that we stopped, and then the one time we didn't, the first time it upset him and. Yeah, and it got me, and it's funny because it's hit Mark more than I thought it would because he's not really got over it that well. I thought Mark would be just like, oh, okay, and he's not.
Do you feel that Shaun it's affected Shaun much?
I don't really see him, so I really don't know.
But when you did
don't know.
When you did the first gig after Paul had died, was Shaun any different? Did he say anything?
It's a long time ago. That was nearly a year ago. Wow. But I know Rowetta did. I know. I can say it's affected her. We all used to kind of keep in our own little bubbles, travelling, and it's kind of brought us together, bizarrely enough.
Right.
I don't know why, but we're more tolerant with each other. Even more so. It's definitely had an effect. It's definitely had an effect. So I've noticed it on Rowetta and Mark. I don't know if they've noticed it with me, but definitely with them two, it definitely has.
Yeah.
He wasn't the healthiest man on the planet, Paul. So I always expected to get a phone call saying he's had a heart attack or something, or he's keeled over, and I kind of half expected that sometime. But when it came, it just seems weird. It's like, it just doesn't seem, it just seems weird. It doesn't seem like, because, it's been part of my life since I was 15, and my job and everything, and he's my best mate, my number one best mate. Yeah. And more than a mate, it was like, I know this is, But he was like, and we were like brothers. We were like brothers. I know people say that, and it's a cliche, but we really were. We really were like brothers.
He was definitely closer to you than he was his own brother. That's for sure.
I know, but that's the way a lot of the times, isn't it? But we were. I mean, it was like we could read each other's minds. It was really weird. Really weird.
Give me an example of that.
All the time we'd finish. You know, we'd be walking down the street and someone had walked down. It'd look like we'd just look at each other, and then we'd just say, you know, that's you know, whoever, you know, and then look, just someone, you know, we just not both of us would say it. We look at each other and go, it'd be hilarious, you know. I remember being at Brixton Academy after the gig once with Terry Hall, who Paul was friends with us, and what was that? We were talking, the three of us, and something started in the background, some noise, and me and Paul went, "Is it?" I can't remember what it was. It's not, is it? And it wasn't. And Terry Hall went, "What?" And we both said something. I can't remember what it was. The same thing, and he went, and Terry Hall went, "God, you two were thinking exactly the same thing about something that wasn't." And when he went, "That's really bizarre." It's weird because I from the band starting, it was always his band as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And I think when you become successful, if you're the bass player, it doesn't become your band anymore, you know. And that's just the way it is, you know. And I think that affected him badly. Do you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And he wasn't controlling, but he was his band, and he just kind of led by example and just guidance. He wasn't a tyrant or anything, but as you know, Paul's not a tyrant. He couldn't be bothered for a start, you know. He couldn't be arsed, not the energy to be a tyrant. No, but he kind of lost that kind of the direction of thing. And I think when fame happens, and I don't think he didn't want fame. I think he wanted recognition.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say recognition. Yeah.
And I think he's got it posthumously, but it's no good. Well, it is good posthumously. It is good because it's about time he got it. It is good, but I wish he'd have got it, you know. And I think, but though he'd been deeply embarrassed about it, you know, wouldn't have been able to deal with it. When he did his Big Arm stuff, it was great, and he was a great frontman. I remember that. Ironically, the first gig he did at King's Arms in Salford is the first gig I'm doing in a couple of weeks, and I go back, and it's really weird. And I remember walking up the stairs, there's the room upstairs, and he was shaking at the top of the stairs. I said, "No one's judging you, you'll be right." And he went, "I know." I said, "You'll be fine." And as I walked past, I went, "Fucking, how are you going to do that? Fucking singing, everyone looking at you." And he said, and as I walked past, he went, "I heard you." He heard me. I was like, "Fucking hell." I thought, "Oh shit, I shouldn't have put pressure on him," you know what I mean? But he was great. He was great that night. Remember the gig? Remember it? I remember it well.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. No, it was good. And underrated, that band.
I don't think he ever broke a sweat in his life, has he? I mean, I remember when we first used to go to the pub after rehearsals. I was 16 and Paul had been 18. And I just started smoking. Shaun smoked, Mark didn't. And I said to Paul, "Why don't you smoke? Is it because of your asthma?" And he went, "No, all that to and fro for the arm, that's way too much work." And you know, he's like, you know, and then ironically he became this chain smoker, but he just thought, and he's just like, "Oh, too much, you know, too tiring, you know."
So did he change? To go back to the early days, so when you started to become successful or recognised, or when factories started to take you on, did that change him at all? Did it make him more resolute to be successful? Did it make him, like, how did that affect him in terms of his approach?
I think he just wore more aftershave. You know what I mean? Not the pair of them. No, I don't. You know what? I think he was just even more. He was just focused. He was always focused on the band. He was like, he was always kind of very early when we first got to factory. We started doing stuff. I think he was one that took it serious more than anybody else. And I think there's always a little bit of resentment in a band about the one who drives the band. You know, there's that thing in the Beatles where they used to call McCartney Beetlehead, and there's that clip where Ringo says that, me and John would be in the garden in Surrey in the afternoon, have a cup of tea, and the phone would go, and we'd go, "It's him, innit?" We don't. He said it's McCartney getting us in the studio. He said, but without him, we'd never got anywhere. So people in bands complain about that, them kind of people, but you need them, or the bands don't succeed. So you need them, but they still complain about them. So we used to call him Monday Head. Monday Head, and he was like, so it was like we'd be doing something. Oh, let's go out drinking. We'll go out to the pub. He'd be like, we've got thingy tomorrow. Well, I'll be fine. And he was quite sensible.
Really?
But then that's why I think he started to drift away from him, and then once you get to a certain level, the press and all that really, and people, don't really want to know about the ins and outs, daily workings of the band or how you write songs or you do. They're more interested in the shenanigans. And I understand that. The same when I watch band, I'm not, and they kind of, I think, one of my best stories, Paul's story was a great one, and I think you were there, actually. I don't know if you were at this moment, you were there. When we was at Richard Branson's studios?
Yeah.
When we been there?
Yeah.
You and Laura? Yeah. Well, it was when we were doing the Rave On EP, Madchester Rave On EP, well, we didn't know it was called that then. And the guy from the Daily Telegraph came down to interview us, and he's what that Tony Wilson liked, because he'd spoke about me and Paul changing indie music to dance music rather than talking about anything else. So he liked that because it's a bit different. And the guy came, and the interview was a Saturday morning at 9:30, and so no one got up. We'd been in the studio till 2, drinking till 6. But Paul said, no, it's a Daily Telegraph, it's a broadsheet, it's pretty, we've got to do it. So we turned up, and I remember it was in a conservatory with all these old records and record players. And me and Paul kind of trumbled in there, hungover, having cups of tea. The guy turned up, was interviewing us. And he said, what kind of music are you listening to? So Paul, Paul's like his record collection. It was like a shoe collection, shoes and records. He started talking about records and music. And the guy wanted to know about music rather than about the band. And that's right up Paul's street, couldn't stop him. And then he's asking us what we're working on. And we was actually working on the song Rave On. And he said, what's the song called you're working on the EP? And Paul just picked up this Buddy Holly album and went, Rave On from Buddy Holly. And then after that, the guy wrote about it saying, oh, he's called it Rave On because they go to raves. Now, I'm not sure whether that's the first time they were called. They were called all-nighters and they weren't called raves before then. Whether that was when they started calling them raves or whether it was a coincidence, but around at that time, it was about Buddy Holly.
Wow. So he just picked a title off a Buddy Holly record just because there was no title to the song, and he just picked...
No, and I knew why, because he didn't want to look like he didn't know what... Because Shaun came up with the titles of the songs, but he didn't want to be caught off guard, like not knowing, you know what I mean? So he was kind of looking, and he had a bullet, and he went, Rave On. And afterwards I said to him, why'd you say that? He said, just, come on, came out. And I don't, but you know what he's like, especially when it comes to music, and he'd become very serious when he talks about music, which you want, don't you? The only time, you could laugh and joke about him, until it was music or shoes or the other thing later on when he became the heroin, when he became, And the first time he did that was we were in Cheetham Hill in New Order's rehearsal room, and they had a kitchen at the back, and he went in the back kitchen to do it. And he didn't hide it for some reason. I walked in and I just said, you dick, what are you doing? And he looked really embarrassed, and he said, I know. And that moment I realised that from then on, the band was on a down, it was beginning of the end.
What kind of period?
You know what? I don't know. I've thought about this. I'm not sure when. It must have been, I think it was, I could be wrong because you get things wrong, don't you? Your mind plays tricks. But I think it was when we was writing songs for Yes Please. So before we went to Barbados.
It would be because it was about a year after Step On came out, I think. So a year after he married Alison, I think. Because it was triggered by, his excuse was that she cheated on him, and that's when he did it.
It was around that time, definitely, yeah. I think he was a combination of things, yeah. But yeah, we got to Barbados and he was really ill with stomach pains and cramps, and they took it. He used to get that with anxiety, didn't he? They couldn't find anything. It was anxiety, but I think it was probably a little bit of missing that as well. I think maybe he just started getting, you know.
And then when he was in Barbados, he got involved in the crack thing as well, presumably. I think he did, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, don't forget the first week we recorded drums, so I wasn't privy to all that the first week. I was stuck in the studio for the week with the percussionists and the producers getting the drum. And then we get the bass in, and I remember said to Paul get the bass in on day 6 to come in, and then so said, he's doing the crap, but he still came in and did it. I remember him not being right and trying to hide it from me.
I could never tell when he'd done crack. Heroin, you can tell a mile off. Like I could tell from like 100 yards away. There's that glow, is that aura, that horrible, nasty.
His mouth changed when he done heroin. He went. Remember when that used to go?
Yeah.
His chin would go like that. It looked like I used to say, you got your ventriloquist chin again. I know you've scored. Ventriloquist. It's like, and he would overcompensate, wouldn't he? He would overcompensate.
And he'd smile, and it's the only time he'd ever clean the house. Cleaned it like when a normal heroin addict, it kind of slows him. It would speed him up, and he'd be all happy and jolly and cleaning the house. And I never understood. I mean, obviously there were times when he'd gouch out as well, but with crack, I never knew. I could never tell when he'd been doing.
No, he denied it, and I was like, I'm sure only because the others said he had, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, I mean that was the only time I witnessed that. But he was great in the studio there, but he knew we were in denial that the band was ending then, and he knew he wasn't in denial. We were in denial, and he'd accepted it, and I think it was really affecting him there.
What? So he thought the band was ending before Yes Please?
Yeah, I think that's why he decided to do that, to start doing heroin. And when we were in Barbados, I think he knew that it was finishing, whereas we kind of did, but I was in denial.
Why did you think it was finishing before Yes Please?
Well, because we all weren't getting on, and we were, with some parts of the band we were just writing. We'd all gone off on our own things, writing. People weren't accepting other people. We used to write. Me and Paul and Mark used to jam together and write in PD, and people weren't accepting what other people did, and even me and Paul were not agreeing with each other musically, which was rare. We usually always do, and it just wasn't the same before. We knew, and then there was a couple of people in the band doing heroin, and then it lost being about the music.
What do you put that down to? What do you think the cause of that was? Was it because there'd been big success and no one could handle that, or was it just down to the two members of the band doing heroin? Like what do you think was?
I think it was a bit of everything. I mean, I was drinking more, smoking weed. I had my moments. Mark was. So, we can't blame just heroin. Everyone had gone off on their own thing, but people weren't getting on. I think, the fame thing, the press were turning us against each other a lot. There's a lot of that. We fell for it. I think it was naive for the press in some point.
Tell me about that. I don't know what you mean.
Well, I think they were trying to pitch, there was things where they were saying, like, they'd say, are you resentful because you're not on the cover of the magazine? So we were like, well, we're fine. And then they say, well, but you're not getting the credit for it. So we weren't. And then they were saying they'd say to Shaun, the rest of the band, PD, they did it a lot with, really. PD wanted to be on the cover, and he didn't, Well, maybe he did, I don't know, he didn't. But they kind of painted us as though we were bitter, and and I think Shaun saw that as us having an ego. And none of it was true, from both sides. And we were a bit naive to us and Shaun. I think both of us are a bit naive.
When you say the press, are you talking about the tabloid press, the music press, the broadsheet?
All of it. Yeah. And people around us as well. And you get people in your ear, all people around us. Everyone was off doing their own thing a lot of the time. And we weren't spending time together as much like we used to. We were a gang. We were, a 4 or 5-headed monster, and that kind of changed. But it happens all the time, I think there's that kind of northern working class insecurity of thinking, imposter syndrome. We're not good enough for this, so it's going to end any moment. So let's not put too much heart and soul into it because it's all going to collapse at some point. So I think we all kind of accepted it that it would do instead of fighting it. And I mean, at the end when we split up, Shaun said we should have just taken a break for 6 months or a year out, and that's probably what we should have done. But the problems were more deep rooted, I think. I had a breakdown, which ended up being malaria tablets that caused it. It ended up in Meadowbrook, where Paul was.
So Meadowbrook's like a psychiatric hospital in Salford, yeah. You weren't there at the same time though, were you?
No, we weren't there at the same time. No, that would have been brilliant, though, wouldn't it, if we were? I was there before and he was there a couple of times afterwards. But it'd been funny if we were there at the same time, wouldn't it? That would have been brilliant. But no, not at the same time, no. But when we went to visit him, they said he's in there. I said, it's all right, I know where he is.
Oh, you did you get there first? Maybe he just was fancied to stay himself, so after he visited you, maybe.
I don't know. It's just, I think me and Paul had suffered from anxiety and depression. But that's the other thing we had in common. We both had depression and anxiety.
Do you think that was caused by your experience being in the band, the highs and the lows? Do you think that triggers mental issues with generally with people? Because it seems to be there's a much higher proportion of successful musicians affected by mental health issues.
No, I think that's why you end up being a musician. Well, it depends. Maybe everyone's different. Mine was caused by the accident I had when I was 11. I never kind of recovered from that. Everything goes back to that. So I think mine goes back further than that. So, but I think maybe so. I don't. It didn't with me. It just doesn't help it. The lifestyle doesn't help. You know, when you've got depression, mental illness, you need stability. You need routine. You don't need a lot of drugs and alcohol. You know, and I mean, I've not seen a psychiatrist for years, but it must be about 15 years ago. They said to me, really, he didn't know what work I did, and he said, I said, I think it's my work, and he didn't ask me what my job was, and he said, really, what you need is somewhere, a job where you don't travel a lot, you have a routine, it's not noisy, and you're not around a lot of people. And I said, well, that doesn't help. He said, what's your job? I said, I'm a rock drummer in a band, and he just started laughing, and he went, I can't help you. So I think, so I think there's kind of that. So I think it doesn't help. I think it just makes it worse rather than triggers it. But everyone's different. Maybe it does,
What was the accident you had when you were 11?
I snapped my arm in half, and my bone and my elbow came through. But the problem was, it was just before I started high school, so I missed 6 months of high school. I was in Salford Royal for a few months. But the problem was, I didn't know whether it'd work again. So that they saved me out. Before I went under, they said we might have to amputate. So I remember that going under. And then the doctors came in the day after and said, you're going to be in for a long time, but we managed to save the arm. But you might not be able to use it. It's a lot of nerve damage. And I was like, oh, I'll just have an arm, won't be able to use it. And I've been having guitar lessons for 3 years. So I thought, I won't be able to play guitar anymore. And then they came to me and said, you will get the nerves back bit by bit. It took 6 years for the nerves to come back in my fingers. But they said, this is what messed me head up. They said, but your arm might never grow. So I might have this 11-year-old's arm for all my life. So so every day, you're laughing. So every day I'd be like this, checking my arm's growth. So that started my OCD, my anxiety. So literally every day I'd be checking my arm, and...
But it did grow. You were all right.
It's actually stronger than my left arm now. I've had no problem. I have a feeling's not great in it when I'm playing guitar. But yeah, I've had no issues with it. It's really weird.
And amazing that you're a drummer as well. Like.
Well, so that's why I bought a drum kit, because I couldn't play guitar anymore. The irony. So so it's really weird. So yeah.
How had you broken it? What happened that made you break it?
So we had this. They have a park. They have the frames. They have the swings on. Well, the swings had been ripped off, and there's at the bar. We pushed a park bench up to it, so we used to run, jump on the bench and grab hold of it, and I fell backwards, and it snapped and it came through. But years later, when I went to see the doctor, he said, if you hadn't done that, you'd have snapped your spine, so it's probably a good thing anyway. So, so I was lucky, really. But the not growing thing, checking it for all through, my teenage years, was just messed me head up. I think my anxiety was there before, and depression. So me and Paul suffered from depression, so we could relate to that. And I remember we're talking literally, I remember it was about a week before, it wasn't a week before he died because he'd just come over, but a week before he left, last time I saw him, and I was saying to him, I said, you know what? I said, if I had heroin, because we talk about anxiety and depression, and I said, you know what? I said, if I had it, it'd be game over. I'd never need anything else. It'd be the perfect answer for me. And he said to me, I know, that's why I kept it away from you. You should never have it. It's the perfect drug for you. That's why I kept it. And he used to keep it away from me. I never saw him do it, ever. Apart from that, the first time, I never saw him do it. But it's just unusual because most heroin addicts I know, everyone I've known has said, oh, try some, because they always want an accomplice, always do. But he never did, never. He kept me away from it always. Even his prescription medication, he wouldn't do it in front of me. He took some anxiety tablet recently. I saw, what's that? He went, nothing. And I knew what it was because I saw it in his prescription, his anxiety thing. And he was embarrassed about it with me, and he didn't need to be, but,
That's what happened really. He got clean when he moved to LA. He got clean, but they put him on a ton of prescription drugs, which there never seemed to be a will to wean him off them. I think he was on 7 or 8 different things, but the stuff he was taking was still abusable to an extent. It might not have been street drugs, but
I know he exceeded his dosage before a gig because of anxiety. Before when he come over to England, because he used to give him anxiety, and he'd say that to me. I'd say, "You're not looking right." He went, I've just had a little bit more than you should have because and I knew he'd be getting anxious.
And I felt like he was never really able to get properly clean and grow and be that person that he could have become. He was always struggling.
He's always in my heart. When he was younger, I really looked up to him. He was a couple of years older than me. I could relate to him, and I really looked up to him in lots of ways. And he was, before he started doing that, I know this is hard to believe, but he was actually quite lively. he was, don't get me wrong, he was never swift of foot, you know what I mean? But he was quite lively and, and talkative and quick and funny and he was my hero. I'm not just saying that, he was. And he was, and he was me growing up, he was the one because he was funny, he was smart, I was well dressed. We got on with the same sense of humour. We loved music. He taught me about music. That 2 years is a lot when you're 16 and 18. But we always, and he never, ever judged me. Ever. We had a few fallings out a few times, just silly. That was caused through other things. But
What were the names that you had for him? That you've mentioned Omar Sharif. What are
Omar, Alf Roberts, Snorbits. His best nickname wasn't even a name; it was a bass line. So we'd if we'd walk down the streets and we'd see some animated version of him, someone loosely overweight with dark hair, dark skin and a big nose. I'd just go ding 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 ding. One of his early bass lines was ding 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 ding. I think the song was called Weekend Starts Here or something. We started with the bass line, and Paul used to do it. So we'd hear or see something, and we'd just go ding 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 ding. And even now, see, he's not alive anymore. We'd be walking down the street and something had happened, and Paul would just go ding 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 ding. Putting how we put my voice on. He'd go ding 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 ding, and that was it. He had a nickname that wasn't even a name. It was a bass line.
I know there was Myra Hindley.
He used to call me Lily Savage, man. What else? He used to call me Les Dennis. He used to call me all sorts. Oh, he had all sorts of me. Usually Quagmire. He called me Quagmire for years. I didn't know what it was until I saw Family Guy, and I was like, yeah, bastard. We had, I can't remember. We had loads of nicknames. The nicknames would change all the time.
That's it for this week. We're playing out with the track that Gaz mentioned earlier, which is something that he did with his French collaborator in LA, Eddie Gronfier. This track is called The Guns of Flixton, and it's not a finished track. This is just the instrumental, and Paul would probably kill me for actually letting you hear this in its unfinished form, but hopefully you won't mind. But maybe it'll get finished by somebody else at some point in the future, but have a listen. We got some more Q&A Zooms coming up, so if you'd like to join in with one or more, please do join our Patrons Club by going to patreon.com/The Paul Ryder Tapes and sign up there. We're really grateful to our amazing patrons for helping us to bring these episodes to you each week. We really wouldn't be able to do it without you, so big thanks to all of you. Website for anyone who needs information is paulryder.tv. Have a fantastic week. We're going to be back again next week, same time, same place, with yet another special bonus edition. And it's a really good one next week, so don't miss it. Big thanks to the legendary Gaz Whelan, and of course, as usual, big ups to the man himself, to the late, great Paul Anthony Ryder. See you next week. Lots of love. Bye.
Glistening Productions.